design organization inside IBM. And IBM has 400,000 people. I don't know how much introduction you got about them, but which is just, I mean, you can think about that. It's like the population of a state or a small country, right? And for a long period of time, IBM was doing this software that was all developer created and designed. And they realized that they were falling behind in design and decided to hire a whole bunch of designers. In fact, I think about 1,000 over the last 3 or 4 years, which is a ton. So I joined in early, opportunistically, into the design process and for them, and I was kind of working on since I had consulted already and done development, they hired me in as a lead there, and I was kind of leading teams to do some of their new websites and things like that for the organization itself, for the IBM design org that was inside of, they're based in Austin and they're in this big building and they have these beautiful, design studios, they're all glass with beams, chairs, and it's really, really an amazing organization. So I was enamored. They gave me the red carpet treatment when they hired me, and I was pretty impressed. And I did that for about a year, and it was interesting because about a year into my work with IBM Design, of helping kind of build this organization, I had to all of a sudden make my products accessible, right? And to be honest with you, like many other people, and I would be ashamed, but it just was the process of my whole career. I didn't really know what that meant and this was only about 3 years ago. So, I reached out to accessibility experts, such as kind of what I am now, and wanted to know, okay, like, what does that mean? How do I make something work better in an digital interface for people with disabilities? And I ended up liking the people that I was working with in this group so much in doing these projects that they sort of coached me into joining their group, and that's where I am today. And so with an interaction design history and then layering on a whole bunch of this accessibility knowledge that I've gained over the last few years, I have moved into a role basically of kind of guiding designers on how to do it also. And a lot of that work has to do with, how do you get designers to design up front with people with disabilities in mind, instead of not thinking about it and then coming to ideate a product, do all of your design exercises, and then come to build it and then go, okay, well, yeah, we have to make this work also for people who are blind. Oh, we have to make this work for, people that can't use a mouse. And that is a very frustrating time to try to do that stuff. So I've been working with those teams to learn how in the design thinking process to start inserting sort of exercises and thoughts, personas, and different things for people with disabilities, so that when we get to the part where, you might have a team of designers, and this is kind of the dream team, as I call it, where you actually have each specific role on your design team. You'll have a researcher, a visual designer, the user experience designer, front developer designer, right? They all work together on this sort of dream team, and then they work with developers to deliver that into the development process. So if they're doing accessibility along the way, I'm sure you're probably learning this, if you do it along the way, then it's much more efficient to get it in, and you're definitely going to have a better chance of getting an accessible product. And kind of the way that I look at it is that the idea is to make it impossible for a development team to build a product that isn't accessible. In other words, if the design has accessibility built into it, when you give it to the developers, it'll be more expensive to take it out, right? So you're weaving it into the fabric of the design, and therefore it just becomes what we like to call, inclusive design, basically. Um, and I've been rambling now for 15 minutes. So, any questions? I guess I don't have too much more on my sheet here, but I'm willing to take questions, or if you want to redirect or whatever.
Unmute your mic. Okay, Thomas, go ahead. Is yours unmuted? Let me mute.
It might be me. I'll mute too. Yeah, I hear somebody. Yeah. Oh, hey.
There we go. Much better, right? Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for making some time to speak with us. The question I have for you is, what would you have wanted to know before, let's say, getting into the field that you feel that you didn't learn in school, but is really necessary for industry?
Well, that's a good question. I kind of think of like my education is a little bit in two sections, and it's interesting because when I went through school the first time, and I was same age as some of you on here, going through undergrad, I really had no idea what I was going to do at all, and I think that the times have changed quite a bit, and I don't know, if I had advice to my kids. Well, I do have advice for my kids, but what I think what I'm leaning towards from the experience that I've had in my career is for them to start looking at their strengths as they get older and understand what they would love to do as a career, and try to figure out how do you do what you love in your career at the same time that you're also doing something that you can survive doing, I guess. And a lot of that and I know I'm straying from your question, but I'll try to get back to that. I think I'm procrastinating that question. It's a tough one. But if you can do, I think the happiness in the career comes a lot of times from doing something that's altruistic that you're also very interested in doing, right? And for me, that is really a technical, that's doing something scientific that helps other people. I think if I had to answer your question, what I would have liked to know when I was younger was how much I love science. And I didn't know that until, recently when I went back to get my master's in HCI, how much I just really love cognitive psychology, and I love the science in that area. But I also am not really sure that I loved it as much at that age. I don't know, but I would have kind of liked to have some insight on myself earlier in my career about what I loved. And that being said, there's a lot also to that, through my, maybe through my 20s, I had a lot of experiences not knowing what I was going to do in my career. And I see a lot of people that are forced to enter their careers very early right now out of necessity, that don't get much freedom to do that. And I don't know if I'd go back and say I wish I knew exactly what I'd be good at so I could have done it then and been further ahead now. It's tough in retrospect, right? But, I guess that's something that I've just learned, in my journey, something like that, that makes sense.
Yeah, right on. I understand. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just a moment. Question.
Hi, Bill. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking to our class. I just had a question about entry-level positions and what, entry-level students are, coming out into the workforce for the first time, let's say in industrial design. What kind of positions at IBM would come to mind for entry-level students? Do you recommend? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself so I wouldn't cause, I think I was causing that feedback loop. I have you guys on these speakers. What I know mostly about IBM, and I helped to probably interview, oh gosh, dozens of young designers that were coming into IBM design. I think that they're looking for, in an entry-level design position, they're looking for a lot of passion in doing user-centered design, I think. And they really like the ability to do storytelling, the ability to really put a story behind a product design and be able to do a storyboard or do a short, storytelling, basically making things human. And to be honest with you, this is one of the toughest things that I have. I'm really not very good at it. I'm generally pretty introverted, and I'm fairly like I said, sort of scientific. I'm more pragmatic or something, and I don't really like selling at all. And that's a side it's a lot of people are really good at it and they love it. And I think you can learn how to do it, and I've learned how to do it. But to be honest with you, that's a tough side for me to kind of put this whole story together. It's like, for me, if I know that a user needs it and they're having trouble with it and I understand their needs, then I just want to build it. I don't want to tell everybody about it and draw these cute pictures. But that's also a really fun part that a lot of people have with design. But I think storytelling is a really popular thing. It's a buzzword. It's that's one thing that you can remember, that I think if you get into interviews and you were asked a question about design and some of your strengths or some of the ways that you like to do design, I think storytelling is a good buzzword to use. And like I said, just the passion. I don't have such a great formal design background, and coming into it later. So one of the things that I know that the people that interviewed me liked was that I just really believed in user-centered design, and I felt like I could help people by building products that they can use, right? And if you really believe in it, I think that really shows. I haven't been involved in the process at first. When IBM Design was reaching out, they were doing a lot of college job fairs and things like that. And they started originally pulling from a lot of the East Coast design grad schools. And there were some, they were building at a kind of higher level. And I was interviewing some of those people, but I think that across the board and across the industry, there's still there's a need still for people that do user-centered design and understand the fundamentals of design and why to do it, right? I mean, work ethic is a big part of the success that I see for a lot of young designers in IBM, and the ability to take criticism, to be social with designs and be able to kind of, talk about it and be open and that sort of thing. So, but I do think that and this is a little bit, my view is a little myopic from just being in mostly IBM. I think that the acceptance of designers and what they do and the importance of design has grown so much over the last 5 to 10 years that the environment for designers inside corporations is quite a bit better. And I think the job market is a little better, and designers are treated a little better because there's a lot of opportunity to, and if you don't like it someplace, they know that there are several other places that would be glad to take you, right? So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Do we have another question? Bo, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The question is, how do you keep up on the new trends and changes in the industry, changes in design? How do you keep fresh and how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. And to be honest with you, I can't keep up with everything. I don't think anybody, I don't understand honestly how anyone keeps up with, for instance, the different development platforms that are out there and the different, I think the industry tries to create change on purpose in order to keep everyone fresh and moving and having a good time. Everyone wants a challenge of learning something new, and there's so many new tools. But the key, I think, is that design tools change and platforms change and technology changes, but humans are pretty static, right? I mean, we're evolving, but it's like a million-year process. So when you really understand humans and people, you can always found your designs in any technology sort of on on those facts, right? So, I mean, right now, just, what I'm really into right now, and I'm not early to this game, it's not a new thing, but I'm really into conversational design right now. And it's kind of a push also for IBM. The Watson technology is, they're trying to interface with a lot of conversation, natural language processing, stuff like that. So I'm like, reading a lot. I've got a little application set up where I'm trying to write a dialogue, if I chat, a little chat bot thing where if I say something that it answers back and, I make up funny answers. And so I've decided really that particular technology is something that's going to be beneficial for me in my career down the road. So I got an echo. Let me mute. Oh, I can't mute myself. Deb, I got a pretty big echo now.
Oh, is it, are you getting feedback?
It's just an echo. Oh, it's gone. Okay. So I guess what I try to do is look at the technology that is going to influence my career and where I want to go. And this is something that's been very important in kind of structuring my path to where I am now. There were certain things that I've always wanted, and it may sound funny, but I always work towards working at home, and that's something that I have now. I'm in California, so I love surfing. And for me to have a balanced lifestyle and have, be able to see my kids as much as I can and be at home and surf, I knew that I could get to this point if I had, the education, if I had the experience and things like that, and I know the technology and that sort of thing. So that's not the same for everybody, but to have the vision of like, okay, there's all these technologies happening, but what is it? I can't stay abreast of everything. I can't, and not only that, but the thing is, I'm doing my job 8+ hours a day, and I don't have the time to just, take a break for 3 hours and learn a new technology. But if you're selfish with a little bit and understand what type of technology is going to get you to where you want to go, I think that's important to think about. And that's kind of how I choose, I guess. Sometimes someone will tell you, learn this or learn that, but in your off hours, and that's how I make my choices. I mean, of course, I watch too much TV and Netflix and all that, and Xbox or what have you. But when I feel too guilty for all of that, then I pick up some of these books. And I think what you're getting now, and especially in that class, is the ability to critically think in that design arena and teach yourselves as you go forward without as much guidance too.
Other questions for Bo? Thank you. That was a terrific. Other questions that you guys have? So I'm curious, what kind of development tools are you using? Are you doing hands-on design? Are you, what kind of tools and technologies do you use right now?
Sure. So I'm not quite as spoiled as some of the. As soon as I left the IBM Design Ivory Tower, which is like this it's a little hard to explain, but they're a very high-profile, high-budget organization. They kind of get what they want. If they ask for it, they get it. The reality of most departments in corporations is that the budget's a little tighter, but it's. I'm trying to think like. I'm doing a project that is an iOS app right now, and the iOS app, and this is a really interesting project. It's a collaboration between West Virginia University on a government grant. This organization called the Job Accommodation Network, and it's jan.org if you want to look it up. And they have their website is awful, and that's why kind of where we're doing some of this work, but. It's a mobile app to let people with disabilities request accommodations in the workplace, and it also helps employers get people with disabilities those same accommodations. So in that particular project, I'm using Adobe XD, Experience Designer, to do the prototyping for the application. I'm using Sketch to draw the icons and some of the graphics for it, and the developers are basically using Swift and Xcode, I think, which is pretty standard for iOS. For other things, I mean, I guess one of the big tools that we use right now for collaboration is Slack, and that's not a tool that I use really. I use Evernote for keeping my own notes on the side all the time. It's kind of the IBM, since it's this huge company and it's so much proprietary information, they make you VPN into their intranet, right? And so you're kind of like locked into this whole thing during your whole day. So a lot of the cloud tools that are outside, like Evernote and some of the other things, are I have to be careful about putting proprietary information in there. But I do like Evernote for just like a lot of times I'll look for if I'm doing some design research and I want to look at a whole bunch of different applications and how to do something, just copy and paste like tons of pictures into Evernote. And there's other tools you can do that too, but that's kind of what I use it for. And I have all the browsers installed. I got to test across those. And one of the probably the biggest tool that I actually have is my coworkers and designers that I know that I work with, right? I mean, that's not really a tool, but if you're designing in a vacuum, it's really tough, and a lot of people are tasked with being like the only designer on a team. That happens to me all the time. In fact, I'm the only designer in the accessibility organization of like 30 people, and I'm just constantly torn one direction or another. And I could lie and say like, this is the best I can do with the design if I'm not talking to my colleagues. But unless I work with other people and get another several brains to look at it and give me ideas, I think that you can't really honestly say that you're sure. You can never be sure. But I guess I'm not really that sure of myself to go ahead and do that.
good to collaborate too, get that, like you said, that additional input.
Yeah, and people will look at things so differently, you know. I'm sure you find this in the class too, that even if you're taught the same heuristics, taught the same stuff, you know what the rules are. People just have such amazing opinions, and their brains just look at things so much differently. And one, I don't know how much usability testing that you guys have done in projects, but one of the most interesting things I find fascinating is building an application and then testing it with people and just being completely blown away no matter what. It doesn't, I mean, honestly, every single time about how people use what you built. I mean, it's just, you know, you hear people saying stupid users and things like that, right? Which is ridiculous because it's obviously stupid designer at that point. But man, I mean, I've seen some people just go right over a giant button, like right in the middle of a page, you know. It could be bright red and it's right in the middle, and they just are looking all over the page for it, and you're dying. Like, it's right there, you know, just click, it's right there, and you can't say anything. But then you realize, okay, well, what was the problem here? And you kind of go back to the drawing board and you try to fix it and figure out, you know, why is the human brain reacting that way for some people? And that's the key. And, you know, there's an interesting dynamic that happens between designers and developers. And I think, you know, Deb and I think in the master's program, we kind of went over a lot more the idea that developers really are looking for at an application from sort of behind the screen, right? If you think about the interface, they're looking at it from the machine standpoint, and designers, we're looking at it from the other side. We're looking from the user side, and things really click really well in teams when the developer gets that and is okay with that, right? Is like, okay, I understand that I have a weakness here, and I'm looking at it's not a weakness, it's just a perspective, right? And so there's an interesting friction that happens when you sort of deliver a design to a developer, and then especially if you don't know them that well and you haven't established anything, and this is kind of where you have to get tough. You have to sort of stand your ground, I guess, and rest on your education and your research and that kind of thing. And I was asked, you know, I think there's a really important question that I was asked at one point, which was, okay, so, and this is what I asked people that I interviewed to later, is that let's say that you designed an application and you give it to the developer and the developer doesn't like it. This is my camera's. Let's say that the developer doesn't challenge you and wants to do it a different way, right? What do you do, right? What are you going to do then? And you get a lot of different answers here from like, well, I would just tell them to do it because I'm the designer, you know, or people that don't really want to be confrontational might give in and let the developer change it or something like that. But you know, for me, the real answer, and I had to find this through trial and error and going through this, was that you can always rely on your research and the sciences behind it, right? You can always say, look, humans react this way. That's why I did that. This is a fact. Let's go ahead and do that. The other answer to that is, for me, is that if the developer has a good idea, well, let's talk about it. Let's change it. Let's figure out if that is a good idea and go ahead and change it. And that's the collaboration that's important too. Because I can tell you that designers coming onto a team will always be challenged by developers who they know better. And if they know better, that's totally fine. A lot of times they will, sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. And there's a lot of times where I have to kind of roll my eyes as a veteran coming onto teams, because it happens to me still. I mean, after you know, someone will say like, they'll just be really, really overt, challenging. Like, yeah, you know, I don't really like the way you did this. This isn't gonna work. These people don't really like this. You know, I know from experience, well, that's not really right. But how I react to that situation is the important part. Like, you know, okay, well, great, let's talk about it. You know, let's see let's dig into this a little deeper and figure it out. And the best thing that you could ever do is let a developer change something and have their own design in the product, right? Because that's what being a stakeholder, you know, then they have real stake and they love you for it, and they can say, like, you know, this guy's cool, he understands me, and he's listening to me. So I think that flexibility is important, and, you know, humility is important, and diplomacy is just as important as sometimes as the product, right? Like, you could just be so adamant and just pissed about, like, this has to be this way. This is the way I designed it. And that just, you know, maybe it is, but remember that the process of building things is just as important as the thing in the end. And I think that if you end up in a company, if you end up in a workplace that doesn't see that, I might start or keep looking a little bit. That, for me, that's very important. Like, I think that a workplace should make it interesting for the workers. And one of the things that we love as designers is new things and new technologies and new ideas, and being able to, you know, keep up and use these things that we've learned. So, I mean, that's a little harsh. I know at times I don't think I wouldn't like quit and, you know, lose my house because of it, but I might be like, all right, I'm kind of seeing that this may not be a great fit. I'm unhappy about this, right?
That's awesome. Those are great comments about the teamwork and the collaboration. And the students in this room were doing user testing last week. So they made low fidelity prototypes and we're testing them against others in class. So I think we all had the experience of people giving them feedback and not seeing the big red button in the middle and stuff like that. You guys have another question for Bo? Yeah. You want to come up and do that, or do you want me to? Okay. You come up here. Just a minute, we're gonna switch.
Sure.
Hey, Bo.
Hey.
So earlier in one of the questions you answered, I guess about technology, you said that ultimately the technology industry is secondary to really understanding because people themselves have not evolved as fast as, you know, as technology. So the question to you is, how do you recommend going about understanding how people work? How to design best for people, not for like your ego or technology.
Okay, so can you repeat just, that's really quiet for me, sorry. This is what, how, I think I got from the how part I need to have repeated.
So how would you go about designing products for people more so than like ego or technology sakes?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, I think what we find too, we'll see that a typical one company in particular, Apple, they tend to push, and I don't know if it's ego. It could be partially ego. I think it's they push design sometimes over usability, and you'll see some of their. Sorry, that's my phone here. I just want to turn it down. I'm not going to answer it. For instance, let's say something like their contacts interface on the iPhone, that some of the form fields don't have labels, or they don't, you know, they went from sort of this like skeuomorphic layout of obvious metaphors to some things that only people that understand mobile usability, that, like, for instance, I would assume, you know, most of most of us on this call have been around mobile devices so long that we understand when a metaphor is skipped. And what I mean by that is like it used to be a direct metaphor to something in real life. Let's say a folder. You know, like folders on computers look like folders, which is sort of ridiculous because their files aren't kept in actual folders, but we understand filing things by folders, so it's a folder, right? And you probably learned this about metaphors. Well, what happens is that, and this is not the right analogy because I can't really come up with the idea for folder specific. But what happens to those metaphors is they gradually change, and eventually it's like telephone when you're talking to a circle of people, and by the time the what you said gets back to you, you can't understand it. Is that the metaphor becomes something that's a symbol that people that aren't used to would know. And I'm sorry if this is really cryptic, but what I'm trying to say is that you have to be careful when you're designing now because of the technical gap that we have in our communities and in like I said, across cultures and everything, right? Where someone's not going to understand something that you did. While every kid that's under the age of 12 completely gets it. Like that's all they grew up with. There are going to be people that don't really get it. And there's a famous example of when Google took off the labels and the buttons or whatever, everything off their page, and they basically they gave it to someone who used a computer before, and I don't remember the exact example. You can look it up, but they basically said, "Okay, here you go, and go ahead." And since the box didn't have any affordance to click in it, and the person, the user, didn't have any idea what to do, and so all of us go to a Google page and we're like, "Yeah, type in the search, right? We got it, we get it, no problem, it's easy." But this person had been along for the journey with everyone else, and there's lots of people out there that haven't and didn't get it. And so I would say that the ego needs to come after the user research, right? And that's the tough part, is really, really innovating in this space when people are staying the same and everybody knows what people are like, to invent something that is, like Apple stumbled upon design with the iPod, with the sort of thing that you touch, right? All of a sudden humans just love it, right? Oh my gosh. And the company went gangbusters from that, right? That type of innovation where, it wasn't that was the ability to take technology and make it more usable without, what I hear, and too, this is a good point for accessibility, is that what I hear a lot is that, we have to sacrifice our design to make a product accessible. And a lot of that has to do with visual design and the colors that we suggest that people use. I think it's BS, because there are tons of constraints in your design that you don't think about every day. Like, if you're building a website, you have to design for a browser. That's a huge constraint. You're designing for a flat screen. That's a huge constraint. So if you have a set of colors that people can see better, and you have to, if you're complaining that I can't use this particular pink or this yellow, yeah, maybe, but it's, again, that's a little bit of usability over design. So I don't know if does that help answer that question. I mean, I guess ultimately what I would say is that your ego should be boosted by making the product enjoyable for the people you're building it for. That's the ego in design, I think, right? The pleasure that people get out of it, not the technology necessarily.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions below? Bo, do you have any other things that you thought of for us?
Well, I didn't plug IBM very much, I guess. And I think that's okay. I mean, I guess, know, um, it's interesting because there are parts of IBM that are different than other parts. But one thing that when I joined IBM, and I will plug IBM a little bit because one thing that I didn't know when I joined IBM was how involved IBM has been in equality throughout the 100 years of history that they have. And they have a great video on their website that I think 100 years of innovation. And it goes through how, they hired people with disabilities earlier than many other companies were doing that, and hiring people that were blind and building technology for those people. The things I'm also involved in the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, right? And IBM's very involved in this area of creating standards across global standards that make sure that no matter what someone does in their technology, that they sort of adhere to these standards that everyone has created. And so I'm in the CSS group, and it's pretty cool because I get to watch what this oops. I get to watch what did someone just I got the echo again.
Is it going okay?
Now it's not echoing for you, like just me.
It's okay for us. Should I turn down my?
Maybe.
Do that.
So it's cool to see the influence that IBM uses as a big company. They use their influence to force, companies like Microsoft or Firefox or, Google. And I say force, but it's not really, it's strong suggestion or something, that we make sure that they don't screw up and build something that people with disabilities can't use. One of the recent Microsoft browser that just came out, the first release, I don't know how much of this is secret, but don't tell anybody. No.
We'll be quiet about it.
Well, it was released with some functionality that completely broke the accessibility features of it, right? And so this was a big deal. It was a big release for them, and we had, we know these people. They have accessibility people, and the community is actually pretty tight. And so there was a lot of pressure really quickly to push back the release of that until we had the accessibility features in there. And so I'm very proud of IBM for that thing. There's other things that IBM does that it's not really my opinion or whatever. But as far as that goes and the responsibility to, I think, especially the software digital interface world, that's an really interesting piece. There's a language called, I don't know, have you talked about Aria at all? Yeah, so probably many of you know HTML, and then when you have HTML come to a screen, and if you're blind, you use, or you have a severe disability, you will use a screen reader like JAWS or like VoiceOver on the Mac. And basically what that just tells you what's going on, what tells you what other people are seeing. Well, that doesn't just work, right? There's special code that you have to put in. Then that's what developers at IBM have to do for these accessible products. They have to insert all this code into the HTML that allows the screen to read the page, basically to see that way. And IBM really was one of the largest designers of that. It kind of invented that whole language and then worked with Freedom Scientific to do, to build screen readers. So, that helps me. That helps me with my personal goals of social responsibility. I think when I think about, and I know, how much money IBM has in offshore accounts or whatever it might be. And, Ginny Rometty's recent statements about Donald Trump were controversial for a lot of people. Basically, I decided not to stand with the all the tech companies in the Silicon Valley. And that is just something IBM has always been. They've always done that. They don't like to be political. And I think IBM can afford it because they're so giant. But I would say it's the smartest company I've ever worked at. I work around people that I really respect. And I've never felt, I don't want to say, but I've never felt so average in intelligence, I guess. And that's a good thing. You know, you always want to surround yourself with people that you respect and that push you, and never feel too shy or humble to just speak up, you know. And that's what learning is about. That's what being intelligent is about, is throwing your ideas out there and listening to what people say, asking a lot of questions, right? I mean, you can't get there by yourself. Your education helps, but people along the way are really gonna be the ones that give you the information. I mean, I just talked with your teacher last week, and we had a discussion about aging and design. And you know, I got information from her that would have been tough for me to find from other people, right? So networking and all of that it's fun for me, and it's also really important, I think, for moving forward.
I agree. I'm all about it.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, I would have to say, and maybe just me, my strength, but I think as a designer, diplomacy is a big part of design. You know, like if you can get what you want by thinking about how to get there without like really making people angry. Which,
Yeah.
You know.
Charming. Right?
Yeah.
That's terrific, Bo. Well, you have been a great guest for us today. This has been very interesting. Our students are working on the type of projects where they are doing research and they're learning. And one of the things I think it's important for you to know is that we do consider IBM a leader in this field. And we consider the standards and things that IBM is setting for disabilities and for inclusion to be among the best in the industry. So I think you can feel good at night knowing that was a large part of your input at IBM.
Well, that's really good to know. I mean, I would, so that's interesting because that kind of throws a question. I don't know what your timing is for this. I don't want to take too much of your time, and I actually have to get to my son's baseball practice here in a second. But I would wonder, I mean, that's something that I would love to know. One of my career goals at IBM is to have the world understand or know that IBM has the knowledge and accessibility and design that we have, right? IBM has kind of misrepresented itself a lot in design over the years and has become maybe it's for more in, the older generations that think of IBM as sort of technical and clunky, but I would be interested to know, what that attitude is. That changing? Has that changed? And I mean, just like totally honest, I know that what people have thought, but I'm interested to know, how did you know that about IBM, and what do you know about IBM from that standpoint?
Well, I know my colleagues told me that IBM was the business to watch in terms of the inclusion. I teach inclusion and social and behavioral change and those types of areas of design. And we are building a UX program right now. And certainly IBM was one of the industry companies we were totally looking at your website, looking at the things that you're doing that you talk about in inclusion and benchmarking against you. So, in the academic world, certainly you're being seen as somebody who is setting the bar higher.
Okay, that's good to know. And I don't know, how many people there, and this is just honest, I obviously can't get you a job, but I just wonder how many people would look for a job at IBM. Would that be something that you would think of just maybe before this conversation that you're having with me? Is that somewhere that you would think about or had considered?
How many would consider a job with IBM? 4, 5, about a third of the room. And our program is mixed between spatial designers, like retail spaces and like that,
Right.
sort of product kind of furniture design, and then now the information architecture, HCI kind of vibe to information design. And so usability. And so I think about a third of our class actually are doing a mobile app or a website project for their senior project.
That's cool.
So of the ones who are actually, that is kind of an emphasis area, I think we have good representation here that certainly would consider IBM as a destination for employment.
Okay. I'm wondering, IBM Design has sort of been broadcasting a bit of a more modern view of technology. I personally would be skeptical that has really reached the general public. IBM's not really big on reaching the general public with any type of personality. I think that's been like, what the heck does IBM do? And when you start with IBM, you realize, well, IBM does everything. So I just think I find it interesting, and I definitely want to reach people with stuff that we do too. And I'm hoping to open source, get some more of this information out there, and be more of a community, a centralized community resource, I think. But it's a kind of a battle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've had students, in addition to yourself, that work at IBM currently, and then I've been connecting with IBM research-wise on the autism and inclusion work. And then I'll be doing that next week at that I4J summit in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fun. I got a comment here that that when I think of IBM, I think of the ThinkPad. And
oh, really?
you know what the ThinkPad is now, right? This is the actual thing.
That's just your ThinkPad.
Yeah.
Sketchbook. Love it.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that is that IBM doesn't actually do any computers anymore. We sold them to Lenovo like in, I think, mid-90s or something like that. And you know what? IBM does a lot of service industry stuff. We have so many different companies that IBM buys and kind of pulls into the fold. There's a lot of research going on and innovation in technology that happens. There's I think the biggest thing for IBM to understand like what Watson is. I'm sure everyone's heard what Watson is. Well, Watson really is just a back-end cloud database machine that anybody can plug into, and it's supposed to learn, and it's kind of a cognitive machine that they used for Jeopardy. And they've put like food carts and attached it to it, so you can put in like your personality, and then it will build some kind of food for you. Those are all sort of marketing ploys, but IBM is a big push. Watson is a big push for IBM. And then, I joined IBM because I knew their reach in the world, and I wanted to do renewable energy, or I wanted to do some smarter city stuff or design for people with disabilities. And, I got that opportunity, and I think that those opportunities are out there for if you really, really look around, for responsible jobs. I'm all about responsible jobs, right? I'm sorry, I sound like a dad.
I think we're kind of all about that. We're all like that.
Yeah, I know, right? That's a good way to be, and it's not always possible, but it makes me happy in my role, in my job. So that's great. Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for listening to me ramble so much. And if you have any questions or anything, you can always pass them through.
I sure will. Well, thank you so much for visiting with us today, Bo, and sharing about your work, about IBM. I think your messages are resonating because we're doing the testing, and I think everybody here is very much about getting a job and working in an industry where they have passion and where they want to be, where they love. So
excellent.
Thank you very much. You have a great evening, Bo.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.